The world was silent that morning. The world was silent that morning. No one knew that in a few minutes, the impossible would become real. For the first time in history, a human being was about to leave the planet. April 12, 1961. Baikonur Cosmodrome. Deep in the Kazakh steppe, a small spacecraft, barely big enough for one person, stood on a launch pad surrounded by frost and wind. Inside sat a young man, 27 years old, with a calm smile. Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin. He didn't know if he would ever come back. No one did. But he was ready. Because this moment wasn't just about one man. It was about the dream of humanity to touch the stars. The race for the heavens. It began with fear. After World War II, the world was divided. Two powers facing each other like rival gods. The United States and the Soviet Union. The battlefield was no longer on land or sea. It was the sky. Both nations wanted to prove who ruled the future. And the future meant space. In 1957, the Soviets shocked the planet. A small metal sphere, Sputnik 1, rose into the night sky, sending a simple beeping signal back to Earth. Beep, beep, beep. That sound terrified the West. It was more than just a satellite. It was a message. We can reach space. Can you? Quote. The space race had begun. The genius behind the dream. In a secret design bureau outside Moscow, a brilliant engineer named Sergei Korolev led a group of scientists and dreamers. To the world, he didn't exist. His name was classified. His photo hidden. But inside those walls, he was known as the chief designer. The man who would take humanity beyond the atmosphere. Korolev had been imprisoned during Stalin's purges. Almost starved to death in a gulag. But he survived. And now? His revenge was not destruction but creation. He wanted to prove that dreams were stronger than fear. His next dream was simple and impossible. Put a man in orbit. The selection. The Soviet Air Force began searching for candidates. They didn't want scientists or soldiers. They wanted pilots. Men used to speed, pressure, and danger. Out of more than 3,000, only 20 were chosen. They were young, healthy, and fearless. The best of the best. One of them stood out. A pilot from a small village near Gzatsk. The son of a carpenter and a farmer. He was short, humble, and had a smile that lit up a room. His name was Yuri Gagarin. When Korolev met him, he said quietly, "He's the one." Gagarin had something no training could give. Human warmth. He wasn't arrogant or cold. He was curious, optimistic, and full of life. He represented what this mission was truly about. Hope. Training for the impossible. For months, the chosen pilots were pushed beyond their limits. They spun in giant centrifuges until they nearly blacked out. They were locked in dark isolation chambers for days to test their sanity. They practiced emergency landings, parachute jumps, and high G-turns. They weren't just training to fly. They were training to survive in a place no human had ever been before. Gagarin always smiled. Even when exhausted, he joked, encouraged others, and refused to show fear. The instructors wrote in their notes. Strong nerves. Excellent under pressure. Always calm. When the final decision came down to two, Yuri Gagarin and German Titov, the choice was clear. Gagarin would go first. The capsule. Vostok 1. The spacecraft was called Vostok, meaning east. It was simple, small, and incredibly dangerous. It had no manual control. Gagarin couldn't steer it. If anything went wrong, he was just a passenger in a metal ball. The engineers calculated the risks. They estimated only a 50% chance he would return alive. But Gagarin didn't hesitate. When someone asked if he was afraid, he smiled and said, "Let's go." The morning of April 12th, at 5 a.m., the steppe was still cold and silent. Gagarin woke up, shaved carefully. He wanted to look clean if the camera caught his face. He put on his orange flight suit and helmet. The letters "MA" painted in white. Before leaving the building, he turned to Korolev and said, "Let's do it. Everything will be fine." As the bus drove him to the launch pad, the sun began to rise. The horizon glowed red, the color of dawn and destiny. He climbed the elevator slowly, step by step, as cameras clicked and engineers saluted. At the top, he turned and gave a thumbs up. Poyekhali. Quote. Poyekhali. Quote. Let's go. Lift off. At 9:07 a.m. Moscow time. Vostok 1 ignited. Flames erupted. Engines roared. And the rocket began to rise. Inside, Gagarin's body was pressed into the seat with crushing force. "Everything is okay," he reported calmly. "I feel good." As the rocket climbed, the blue of the sky faded into darkness. And then, silence. He was weightless. Earth floated below him. Blue. Bright. Alive. "I see the earth. It's so beautiful." Quote. Those words would echo around the world. For the first time in history, a human being saw the planet from space. No borders. No nations. Just one world. Glowing in the endless night. One orbit. One humanity. Vostok 1 circled the Earth in 108 minutes. In that short time, humanity changed forever. Below, people stared at their radios in disbelief. In America, NASA engineers listened in silence. In Moscow, crowds filled the streets, crying and cheering. It wasn't just a Soviet triumph. It was a human one. When Gagarin's capsule re-entered the atmosphere, flames surrounded it. The temperature rose to 3,000 degrees. He couldn't see anything. Just fire. Then, suddenly, silence again. He ejected, parachuted down, and landed safely near a field. A farmer and her daughter saw him and screamed. They thought he was an alien. He smiled and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm one of you." A new dawn. When Yuri Gagarin returned home, he was no longer just a pilot. He was a hero. The first man in space. The face of a new era. The whole world celebrated him. Children wrote his name in chalk on the streets. People believed, for the first time, that anything was possible. But behind the glory, there was also tragedy, politics, and silence. Because the story of Gagarin didn't end in triumph. It ended in mystery. The hero returns. The world erupted in celebration. When Yuri Gagarin returned to Earth, he was no longer a man. He was a symbol. The first human to cross the boundary between Earth and the stars. The proof that humanity had broken its chains. The Soviet Union declared him a national treasure. Posters of his smiling face appeared in every city, every school, every home. Children learned his name before they learned the names of the planets. Factories stopped work for a day. People danced in the streets. The world had a new hero. And his name was Gagarin. The triumph. In Moscow, an ocean of people filled Red Square. The streets were decorated with banners, music, and flags. Gagarin rode through the crowd in an open car, waving, his smile as bright as ever. Millions cheered. Soldiers saluted. The bells of the Kremlin rang. Beside him stood Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, beaming with pride. The world had witnessed a victory not just of technology, but of ideology. For the Soviet Union, Gagarin was proof that socialism had conquered the heavens. For the people, he was something more. The son of a peasant who had touched the stars. He spoke briefly, humbly, thanking those who built the rocket, those who believed. His voice was calm and warm. The voice of someone who belonged not to power, but to the people. That humility made him even greater. The world's guest. Soon, Gagarin's fame crossed all borders. He became the first global celebrity of the space age. He traveled to countries that had once been enemies. In London, hundreds of thousands filled the streets just to glimpse his face. In Paris, people climbed rooftops to wave as his car passed by. In Tokyo, school children handed him folded paper cranes. In Cuba, Fidel Castro embraced him like a brother. Everywhere he went, he carried no weapon, only his smile. He spoke not of politics, but of peace. The newspapers called him the Columbus of the cosmos. He was the proof that humankind could dream together. For a brief moment, the Cold War paused, not in treaties, but in awe. A symbol, not a man. But symbols are not allowed to live ordinary lives. When the parades ended, Gagarin found himself alone again. He wanted to fly, to train, to work on new missions. But the government had other plans. They told him he was too important to risk. The first man in space could not be allowed to die in a test flight. He was ordered to stop flying fighter jets. His every move was guarded, controlled, approved. They gave him a desk, medals, and endless ceremonies. He smiled, shook hands, and repeated speeches written for him. The man who once soared beyond Earth was now trapped on it. At first, he accepted it with patience. He signed autographs, met foreign leaders, attended banquets. But slowly, the cage began to close. The weight of glory. The more famous he became, the lonelier he felt. He missed his wife Valentina and his daughters. He missed the cockpit, the rush of flight, the silence above the clouds. Friends noticed the change. He laughed less. He drank more. His eyes, once filled with light, grew tired. He often visited airfields just to watch planes take off. He would stand for hours, looking at the sky he could no longer touch. Once, a colleague asked what he was thinking. He said quietly, "I'm thinking that the sky misses me." The world adored him, but he no longer felt like he belonged to it. He belonged to the sky. The chief designer. In the background, Sergei Korolev, the man who made it all possible, was racing against time. He wanted to send more people into orbit, then to the moon itself. But his health was failing. The pressure from the government was immense. The Americans had announced their Apollo program. The race for the moon had begun. Gagarin often visited him. They talked not about politics, but about the future. About a time when people would live among the stars. Korolev promised Gagarin that he would fly Ag-Ain. But in 1966, the chief designer died during surgery. The dreamer was gone. And with him, something inside Gagarin dimmed. Without Korolev, the space program lost its heart. The engineers continued, The rockets flew. But the soul was missing. And Gagarin, the face of that dream, was now a ghost of his own legend. The return to the sky. In secret, Gagarin began flying again. He trained quietly, against orders, determined to return to space one day. He was no longer the shining hero of 1961, but a man searching for purpose. He enrolled in advanced pilot training, flying the MiG-15 jet. His instructors said he was still precise, disciplined, fearless, but something was different. A quiet urgency, a need to prove he still belonged in the air. He wanted to be part of the new missions, to lead, to inspire the next generation. But the system that once celebrated him now feared losing him. He was both the pride of the nation and its prisoner. The final flight. March 27, 1968. It was cold and cloudy near the town of Kazakh. Gagarin took off in a MiG-15 with his instructor, Vladimir Seryogin. The flight was supposed to be routine, a short training exercise. Minutes later, radio contact was lost. Search teams combed the forests for hours. Then they found it. Wreckage scattered across the ground. The aircraft had disintegrated on impact. There were no survivors. The news struck like thunder. The man who had once risen above the earth had fallen back to it. The Soviet Union went silent. Factories stopped. Radio stations played sad music. Millions cried openly. Even those who had never met him felt the loss as if the sky itself had fallen. The mystery. The government released almost no details. Rumors spread. A collision with another jet. A bird strike. A sudden maneuver. Some believed it was an accident. Others whispered of secrecy and cover-ups. For decades, the truth remained locked away in archives. But those who knew him said one thing clearly. Gagarin died the way he lived. Flying. He was not afraid. His ashes were placed in the Kremlin wall, among the greatest heroes of the Soviet Union. But his story belonged to more than one nation. It belonged to everyone who had ever looked at the stars and dreamed. The legacy. Yuri Gagarin's flight lasted just 1 hour and 48 minutes. Yet it changed the course of human history. He showed that courage could overcome fear, that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. Decades later, astronauts from every country, including those once considered enemies, speak his name with respect. Every spacecraft that leaves Earth carries a piece of his legacy. Every orbit, every landing, every exploration is a continuation of his journey. He reminded humanity of something simple and eternal. That the sky is not a limit, but a beginning. Epilogue. There are monuments to him in every corner of the world. But the greatest monument is invisible. It floats above us, glowing blue and alive. Every time we look at Earth from space, we see what he saw. One planet, one people, one fragile home. Yuri Gagarin was the first to leave it. And in doing so, he reminded us how beautiful it truly is.